In this video, we are going to go over how to paint up a new Vampire Lord from the Age of Sigmar new release of the Soulblight Gravelords. But before we get into the painting, we have to do a little modification to our miniature. So we are going to give our Vampire Lord a little bit of a haircut. At first I thought I can deal with the Crystal Gale hair, but I decided it just looked a little bit too silly. Crystal Gale? Anybody? Oh, never mind. The new ends of the hair were trimmed up with a knife and a little bit of plastic cement, and the bat hair portions themselves I repurposed and put them on the base. So then later we could paint up the hair to look like something supernatural misty, and we have bats flying around on the base. I decided to stipple on the color to the armor to make it look a little bit more interesting, and we're starting off with a violet red base, and on top of that we are beginning our stippling with scarlet red, and this is starting out pretty rough. As we move up through our highlights, we'll start refining our stippling, going a little bit finer, but to begin with I want to get that good undercoat of red going. Also to note, I left the shield off so it would be easier to paint, and I should have left the head off as well. Trying to paint the mouth with the armor on was a little bit difficult, so I suggest leaving that off until the end. For our next layer, I mixed in some vermilion to our scarlet red, but I also added a tiny drop of the violet red because I didn't want to go too red with our paint scheme right away. I wanted to retain some of that violet color. And you can see here we are applying this much like we would with our highlights if we were layering them up the standard way. We are concentrating on our the highlight areas, then working down into the base coat. For a stippled texture to stand out, you have to have a lot of contrast. So you're going to use a lot less layers when you're painting it. That's why we are going from that previous mixture all the way up to a very light mix of vermilion and elf skin tone. Now we've stippled on our highlights, but we still have to stipple in our shade as well. And for that we're going back to that original violet red, going a little bit darker with it this time by mixing in some black, and just repeating the same process that we did with the highlights, except for in the recessed panel areas. Final thing we're going to do is to give the armor a glaze of red ink. The elf skin tone I mixed into the vermilion gives a nice bright red color, but also a hint of pink, which I don't want. So I'm counteracting that by adding our red ink glaze here. So this is going to tone down our pink color. It's also going to raise up our shade a little bit, so we want this to be a very thin layer. If we put on too thick of a glaze, we're going to lose all our stippled pattern, and we definitely do not want that. You may have noticed I was only painting half of the armor because I did decide to do a two-tone effect with the armor and had a little bit of a problem deciding what color to use. Initially I used purple, but I just didn't feel like it was working out. It wasn't quite what I wanted. Instead, I decided to go for red, but not the exact same red we just painted. I wanted to go for a different shade of red, so we're going to go a little bit more brown, starting off with black red mixed with cavalry brown, and this is going over a very dark, near black undercoat. And then for our final highlight, adding in some Parasite Brown, a very orangey brown color. And so we have this two-tone armor effect here, not only in texture, because the first one was stippled and this one is layered, but also we have that bright, intense red of some parts and a much deeper, more brown red in others. The skin's going to be very easy to handle because we only have a face to paint. Starting off with a mix of pale flesh with a little bit of hexed lichen mixed in, and then I'm applying a wash of hexed lichen, and then we simply add more of the pale flesh into the original mixture. 3 times, finish the face in about a minute. Very easy to do. For the hair, rather than going for the Pippi Longstocking look, we're going to go with black. But instead of just highlighting it as black, we're actually going to highlight it with green. Starting with a black base and then mixing about equal amounts of deep green and black together. And then to get some highlight on the tips, deep green with flat yellow. For the mace, we're going to go with something similar to the hair, once again using black and deep green, but instead we're going to add white instead of yellow to give it a little bit more of an ethereal look. So it ties a little bit into the hair color, but it's not the exact same color. We're also going to use a simple edge highlight. Starting off with that deep green, you can see we're painting that whole band going along the edge, painting that whole band deep green. Then for our next coat, we're going to use the side of the brush just to catch the edge of that edge. And then finally, just on the tips, that most extreme color. In addition, we are going to use these exact same colors on the little misty things that are holding up the bats, except for we're going to use a lot of white with just a little bit of the deep green added. And then finally, last but not least, the emblem on the shield. And we're using, once again, those exact same colors, deep green and white. So using the same colors we used on the mace, not going as extreme as we did on the final tips on the mace, and definitely not as much white as we added to the wisps. Just something to note, we could have gone purple or violet with this emblem as well here. We're really maxing out the amount of green we have on the miniature. If we wanted to bring the purple that's in the face out a little bit more, could have done this in purple as well. It's a tough call, 50-50, whichever way we could have gone. I don't think one color is better than the other in this particular situation. And that is our finished Vampire Lord, an improvement on the original, I believe. We have a very strong red tone to the armor with 2 different shades of red. One of those has texture, the other one is painted smooth. Our secondary color, green, is very strong throughout. Again, we could have emphasized the purple a little bit more by adding it here or there. Most likely place would have been on either the mace or the shield. And in hindsight, if we did purple on the shield, we could have added some green to the non-metal metallic gold. So that would have been a nice place to add a little bit more of that color. But in the end, we are done. Not bad for a quickie paint job. 1 figure down for the vampire counts. How many more are going to come? I have no idea, but stick around. Thanks for watching. There may be more coming soon. Bye-bye.
Let the share jokes begin.
Hey, it looks like Cher.
I don't tan.